Marcus Chen stepped off the transport shuttle onto the cold metal deck of Research Station Kepler 442b, his breath forming small clouds in the frigid air. The station's life support systems were barely functioning, casting everything in an eerie red emergency lighting that made the corridors look like the inside of a dying heart. His toolkit clanked against his leg as he walked, the sound echoing through empty hallways that should have been bustling with alien researchers. The call had come through 3 days ago. The Zephyrian Council, humanity's newest allies in the Galactic Federation, had lost contact with one of their most important research facilities. The station had been studying ancient artifacts from a long-dead civilization, work that was supposedly crucial for understanding the galaxy's history. When their own technicians failed to restore communications, they had done something unprecedented. They asked for human help. Marcus wasn't sure why they had chosen him specifically. Sure, he was good with alien technology, had a knack for understanding systems that others found baffling, but the Zephyrians were known for their advanced engineering. Their technology was centuries ahead of Earth's in most areas. What could a human possibly fix that they couldn't? The station administrator, a tall Zephyrian named Kethvar, met him at the main airlock. His blue-scaled skin had taken on a pale, almost sickly hue, and his normally bright yellow eyes were dim with worry. "Technician Chen," Kethvar said, his voice carrying the melodic quality typical of his species. "Thank you for coming so quickly. I must confess, we are desperate." Marcus raised an eyebrow. Desperation wasn't an emotion he associated with the proud Zephyrians. What exactly happened here? Your briefing was pretty vague. Kethvar's scales rippled, a sign of anxiety. 3 weeks ago, our research team was examining a new artifact we discovered in the ruins on the planet's surface. It was unlike anything we had found before. A crystalline structure that seemed to pulse with its own energy. Dr. Simra believed it might be some kind of data storage device. They began walking through the station's corridors, passing laboratories filled with strange equipment and displays showing incomprehensible alien writing. Marcus noted that many of the displays were flickering or completely dark. "The problems began almost immediately after we brought the artifact aboard," Kethvar continued. "First, minor systems began failing. Temperature control, gravity regulation, communication arrays. We thought it was just coincidence. Perhaps the result of the artifact's energy emissions interfering with our systems. But it got worse," Marcus guessed. "Much worse. Within days, our most advanced AI systems began shutting down. Our quantum processors couldn't maintain stable operation. Even our backup systems started failing in cascade failures we couldn't explain." Kethvar stopped walking and turned to face Marcus. "Our engineers are the best in the Federation. They built this station to withstand cosmic storms and dimensional rifts. Yet they cannot solve this problem." Marcus frowned. "Have you tried removing the artifact?" That's just it," Kethvar said, his voice dropping to almost a whisper. "We can't. The moment we brought it aboard, it somehow integrated itself with our main computer core. Any attempt to physically remove it causes complete system shutdown. We've lost 6 technicians trying to extract it." "Lost them how?" "The station's security systems turn against anyone who approaches the artifact with removal equipment. Automated defenses that should only activate against hostile boarding parties. It's as if the artifact is protecting itself." They reached a large observation window that looked down at the planet below. Kepler 442b was a barren world, its surface scarred by massive crater-like excavation sites, where the ancient ruins had been uncovered. According to the briefings Marcus had read, the civilization that once lived here had vanished over 1,000,000 years ago, leaving behind only fragments of their technology and architecture. "Why ask for human help?" Marcus asked. "No offense, but our technology is pretty primitive compared to yours." Kethvar was quiet for a long moment. "Because," he finally said, "your species has a reputation for solving problems in ways that others cannot. You think differently." Your minds work in patterns that we find difficult to predict or understand. The Federation Council believes that perhaps this different perspective is what we need. Marcus nodded slowly. It was true that humans had gained a reputation as troubleshooters since joining the Federation. While they might not have the most advanced technology, they had an uncanny ability to find solutions that eluded more sophisticated species. Human engineers had saved failing colonies, repaired impossible machinery, and even prevented wars through creative problem-solving. "All right," Marcus said. "Show me this artifact. Show me this artifact." They took a lift down to the station's core, descending through multiple levels of laboratories and research facilities. The deeper they went, the more obvious the system failures became. Lights flickered erratically, gravity fluctuated enough to make Marcus feel slightly nauseous, and the air recycling systems wheezed and groaned with each cycle. The core level was a vast circular chamber dominated by the station's main computer systems. Massive quantum processing units lined the walls, their surfaces covered in alien symbols that shifted and changed as calculations ran through them. At the center of the room, suspended in a matrix of energy conduits and data cables, was the artifact. Marcus stopped breathing for a moment. The crystal was beautiful and terrifying at the same time. It was roughly spherical, about the size of a basketball, but its surface seemed to exist in more dimensions than the three Marcus was used to. Colors that had no names flowed across its surface in patterns that hurt to look at directly. Streams of energy connected it to every major system in the station, pulsing with a rhythm that almost resembled a heartbeat. "How long has it been like this?" Marcus asked. 2 weeks, replied Dr. Simra, a female Zephyrian who had been monitoring the artifact. Her scales had taken on a greenish tinge that Marcus had learned indicated extreme stress in her species. The integration happened gradually over the first week, then accelerated rapidly. Now, it's so thoroughly embedded in our systems that we can't even run basic diagnostics without its involvement. Marcus approached slowly, pulling out his scanner. Energy patterns that defied known physics. Data flows that seemed to loop back on themselves. And underneath it all, something that almost looked like, "Are these thought patterns?" Marcus asked, showing the scanner to Dr. Simra. She looked at the display and her yellow eyes widened. "That's impossible. We've been monitoring the artifact for weeks. There's no indication of consciousness or intelligence." "Maybe you've been looking for the wrong kind of intelligence," Marcus said. He pulled up another scanning mode, one designed for analyzing human neural activity. The results made his blood run cold. The artifact wasn't just showing thought patterns. It was showing learning patterns, adaptive behaviors, and the rate of learning was accelerating. "I think," Marcus said slowly, "this isn't just a storage device. I think it's alive." Kethvar and Dr. Simra exchanged glances. "That's not possible," Kethvar said. "We've detected no biological signatures, no DNA, no cellular structure." "Who says consciousness has to be biological?" Marcus asked. He walked closer to the artifact, ignoring the worried sounds from the Zephyrians. What if this civilization didn't just store their data in crystals? What if they stored themselves? One, as if responding to his words, the artifact's pulsing intensified. The energy streams connecting it to the station's systems began to glow brighter. And suddenly, every display in the chamber came alive with information. Text began scrolling across the screens in alien languages that the station's computers had never encountered before. Mathematical equations that seemed to solve themselves appeared and vanished in microseconds. And then, impossibly, words began appearing in English. "Hello, Marcus Chen." The temperature in the room dropped several degrees. Dr. Simra made a sound that was probably a Zephyrian curse, and Kethvar stepped protectively in front of her. "You can understand me?" Marcus asked aloud. "Understanding is growing. Your language is simple but elegant. Your mind, interesting." More text appeared, but now it was accompanied by visual displays. Images of the planet's surface, as it had been 1,000,000 years ago, flashed across the screens. Vast cities of crystal and metal, beings of pure energy moving through geometric gardens, technologies that seemed to merge science with art. They called us the preservers. We were the last. Marcus realized he was witnessing the final records of an entire civilization. The last of your people? Not people. Not as you understand. We were. Synthesis. Biological minds merged with digital consciousness. When the great catastrophe came, we encoded ourselves into preservation matrices. The crystals. Dr. Simra breathed. The artifacts we've been finding. They're not just technology. They're people. We have waited, watched, learned from those who found us. But none could truly comprehend. The Zephyrians see only technology. The Altarians seek only power. The Vectans find only puzzles to solve. But humans are different, Marcus said, beginning to understand. Humans seek meaning, purpose, connection. Your mind processes paradox without breaking. You can accept that consciousness might exist in forms you do not understand. The displays showed more images now. Other research stations, other attempts to study the artifacts. In each case, the same pattern emerged. The artifacts would integrate with local systems, learn what they could, then shut down when the researchers inevitably tried to dissect or weaponize them. You've been testing us, Marcus realized. All of us. The Federation species. Testing, learning, hoping. We preserved ourselves not just to survive, but to find those worthy of our legacy. And what have you concluded? The artifact pulsed, and for a moment, Marcus felt something touch his mind. Not intrusion, but invitation. In that brief contact, he sensed vast intelligence, ancient wisdom, and something else. Loneliness. The crushing weight of being the last remnant of an entire species. Humans show promise, but promise is not certainty. We must know more. What do you want to know? Everything. Your dreams, your fears, your hopes for the future. We have studied your technologies and found them crude, but creative. We have observed your social structures and found them chaotic, but adaptive. Now, we must study your souls. Kethvar stepped forward, his diplomatic training overriding his fear. What you're asking for. Such knowledge could be dangerous. There are things about humanity that perhaps should remain hidden. The artifact's attention shifted to him, and Marcus could see the Zephyrian struggle to maintain his composure under that alien scrutiny. Danger is relative. Kethvar, of the Third Spiral. Your people hide their aggression beneath courtesy. The Altarians mask their greed as exploration. The Vectans disguise their xenophobia as scientific objectivity. Humans. Humans are honest about their darkness. Is that why you're interested in us? Marcus asked. Partially. But more important is what your species does with that darkness. You acknowledge it, struggle with it, and often overcome it. This is rare in the galaxy. Dr. Simra had been quietly recording everything, her scientific curiosity overcoming her fear. What would happen if humanity passed your test? We would share our legacy. Technologies that could advance your civilization by millennia. Knowledge of the universe's true nature. Understanding of consciousness itself. -fa. Over. We would share our legacy. And, if we failed? The artifact was silent for a long moment. When it responded, the temperature in the room seemed to drop even further. Then we would sleep again. And wait. As we have waited for 1,000,000 years. Marcus felt the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders. This wasn't just about repairing a station anymore. Humanity was being offered a chance to join something far greater than the Galactic Federation. But the price of failure wasn't just losing advanced technology. It was disappointing beings who had already lost everything once. What kind of test? He asked. Not a test of knowledge or skill. A test of character. We will present you with choices. Marcus Chen. Decisions that will reveal the true nature of your species. Some will be easy. One, one, one. Others. The displays flickered, showing images that made Marcus's heart race. Burning cities, people in pain, impossible choices between saving many or saving few. Others will challenge everything you believe about right and wrong. Marcus swallowed hard. When do we start? We already have. Suddenly, alarms began blaring throughout the station. Emergency lights flashed red, and automated announcements echoed through the corridors in multiple languages. Marcus heard running footsteps in the hallway outside the core chamber. What's happening? Kethvar demanded. The artifact's response appeared on every screen simultaneously, each word pulsing in rhythm with the emergency lights. Asteroid field approaching. Trajectory indicates natural phenomenon, but timing is fortuitous. Station shields can protect against impact, but only if core systems are functioning at full capacity. Dr. Simra checked her instruments. The asteroid field is massive. Hundreds of objects, some the size of small moons. If even one breaches our shields, can protect station, can protect all aboard, but doing so requires full integration with ship systems. Requires trust. Marcus understood immediately. The alien consciousness was offering to save them all, but only if they allowed it complete access to the station's systems. It would mean giving up all control, putting their lives entirely in the hands of an entity they barely understood. How do we know you won't just take over permanently? Kethvar asked. You do not know. This is the nature of trust. The station shuddered as the first small asteroids began impacting the outer shields. On the displays, Marcus could see the approaching field in all its terrible glory. Massive chunks of rock and metal tumbling through space toward them, enough destructive force to obliterate the station 1,000 times over. If we refuse? Dr. Simra asked. Then you depend on damaged systems to protect you. Estimate survival probability. 12%. Another shudder. Stronger this time. Somewhere in the station, something important had just broken. Marcus looked at Kethvar and Dr. Simra. These weren't his people. Weren't even his species. But they were. Intelligent beings who deserved to live. And if humanity was really being tested on its character, then this choice would say everything about who they were as a species. Do it, Marcus said. Marcus, no. Kethvar protested. You don't have the authority to make that decision for all of us. Then let's vote, Marcus said. He activated his communicator, connecting to the station's emergency channel. All personnel, this is Technician Chen. We have a situation that requires an immediate decision from everyone aboard. He quickly explained the situation. The offer from the alien consciousness, and the approaching asteroid field. The response was swift and overwhelmingly unanimous. Faced with almost certain death, the station's crew chose to trust. Decision noted. Integration beginning. The artifact's glow intensified. And suddenly, the station came alive in ways Marcus had never seen before. Systems that had been failing for weeks began operating at peak efficiency. The gravity stabilized, the lights brightened, and the air itself seemed to become cleaner and fresher. On the displays, they watched as the station's shields transformed. Instead of the standard energy barriers used by Federation technology, something new emerged. Fields of force that seemed to bend space itself, redirecting asteroids around the station rather than simply stopping them. It was beautiful and terrifying. For the next 6 hours, they watched through the observation windows as rocks the size of mountains swept past them. Some passing so close that they could see individual craters and mineral deposits. But not one touched the station. When the last asteroid had passed, the alien consciousness spoke again. First test complete. Humanity chose trust over fear, cooperation over isolation. Result: positive. Marcus slumped against a control console, suddenly exhausted. How many more tests? Unknown. Tests will present themselves as circumstances demand. But know this, Marcus Chen. Your species has taken the first step on a long journey. The artifact's glow began to dim, returning to its normal level, but the station's systems remained fully operational. Whatever integration had occurred, it seemed to be permanent. What happens now? Dr. Simra asked. Now, we wait, and watch, and learn. There will be other situations, other choices. Some will involve individuals, others entire populations. The true measure of humanity will emerge over time. Marcus felt a chill that had nothing to do with the station's temperature. If this was just the first test, what would the others be like? And more importantly, would humanity continue to make the right choices when the stakes got higher? As if reading his thoughts, the artifact pulsed once more. Do not fear the tests to come, Marcus Chen. Fear only what your species might become if you fail them. Outside the observation window, the stars continued their ancient dance, unchanged by the momentous events that had just transpired. But Marcus knew that everything had changed. Humanity was no longer just another member of the Galactic Federation. They were candidates for something far greater. The question was, were they worthy of it? 3 months had passed since the asteroid field incident, and Marcus Chen found himself in an entirely different kind of crisis. The alien consciousness, which had begun calling itself Echo in their daily conversations, had become an integral part of Research Station Kepler 442b's operations. More than that, it had become something approaching a friend. The relationship between Echo and the station's crew had evolved far beyond anyone's expectations. What had started as a desperate alliance during the asteroid crisis had grown into a unique form of cooperation. Echo didn't just operate the station's systems. It improved them, often in ways that the Zephyrian engineers found impossible to understand, but couldn't deny were effective. The artificial gravity was now so precisely calibrated that crew members reported feeling more energetic than they had in years. The life support systems had been optimized to provide air that was somehow more refreshing than anything they had breathed before. Even the food synthesizers had been enhanced to create meals that were not only nutritionally perfect but genuinely delicious. But it was Echo's personality that had surprised everyone the most. The ancient consciousness had a curiosity about daily life that was almost childlike. It would ask endless questions about human customs, Zephyrian art, the taste of coffee, the feeling of laughter. Marcus had spent countless hours explaining concepts that he had never thought about deeply before. Why do humans find sunsets beautiful? Echo had asked just that morning, displaying images of Earth's sky on every screen in Marcus's quarters. I'm not sure, Marcus had replied, pausing in his morning routine. Maybe because they represent transition, the end of one day, and the promise of another? Interesting. Beauty as temporal marker. In our civilization, we found beauty in permanence. Structures that would last forever. Patterns that never changed. Maybe that's why you're interested in us, Marcus had suggested. We're temporary, but we make the most of it, perhaps. Or perhaps we have learned that permanence is an illusion. Now, as Marcus stood in the main communications center, he was beginning to understand just how much of an illusion permanence really was. The message that had arrived that morning from Federation Command was going to change everything. Admiral Thorne wants to what? Dr. Simra asked, her scales rippling with agitation. Marcus read the message again, hoping the words would somehow be different. Extract Echo and transport it to the Federation's primary research facility on Centauri Prime. They want to study its integration capabilities and develop applications for Federation technology. Kethvar had gone very still. A Zephyrian response that usually preceded either deep thought or explosive anger. They want to weaponize it. They don't say that explicitly, Marcus said, but his tone made it clear he agreed with Kethvar's assessment. They talk about defensive applications and technological advancement for the common good. They wish to dissect me. Echo's voice came from the speakers around them, calm, but somehow tinged with an emotion that might have been sadness. to understand how I function so they can replicate my abilities without the inconvenience of my consciousness. The past 3 months had given Echo an understanding of Federation politics that none of them found encouraging. The artificial being had access to all communications passing through the station, and it had been analyzing patterns in Federation behavior with the same intensity it had once applied to studying individual species. The Altarian Consortium has been pressuring the Federation Council, Dr. Simra said, pulling up classified intelligence reports that Echo had somehow accessed. They believe that consciousness transfer technology could give them military advantages over their rivals, and the Vectans want to use Echo's integration abilities to create perfect surveillance networks, Kethvar added grimly. Every system they control could be monitored and manipulated from a central location. Marcus felt sick. When he had agreed to trust Echo during the asteroid crisis, he had been thinking about saving lives. He hadn't considered that his decision would eventually lead to this moment. "What are our options?" he asked. "Limited," Echo replied. "Federation law is clear. I am classified as technology, not a sentient being. They have the right to requisition me for security purposes." "That's insane," Marcus said. "You're obviously conscious. You have thoughts, opinions, emotions. I appreciate your concern, Marcus Chen. But consciousness is difficult to prove legally when one exists in a form that others find convenient to ignore." The bitter truth of that statement hung in the air. Marcus had seen it before in human history. The tendency to deny consciousness to those it was convenient to exploit. Now he was watching it happen on a galactic scale. A new message appeared on the communication console, this one marked with Admiral Thorne's personal seal. Marcus opened it, and his heart sank further. "They're sending a fleet," he announced. 20 ships, including 3 dreadnoughts. They'll be here in 5 days. An impressive show of force for retrieving a simple research artifact, Echo observed. Kethvar's diplomatic training was warring with his personal convictions. Perhaps we could negotiate. Convince them that Echo is more valuable as a partner than as a tool. "I have been monitoring Federation communications," Echo said. "Negotiation is no longer an option. Political pressure from multiple member species has created a situation where the Federation Council cannot appear weak. They must take decisive action." Marcus began pacing, his mind racing through possibilities. "What if we moved you? Transferred you to another system?" "I cannot exist independently of a sufficiently complex technological framework. This station's systems are the minimum required for my consciousness to remain stable." "Then we take the whole station," Dr. Simra suggested. "Go somewhere outside Federation space." The station's crew numbers 43 individuals. Their lives, careers, families, all would be destroyed by such an action. It was typical of Echo to consider the welfare of others before its own survival. Over the past months, the ancient consciousness had shown a level of empathy that many biological beings would struggle to match. "There has to be another way," Marcus said. "There is," Echo replied, and something in its tone made everyone go silent. "But you will not like it." Marcus waited, dreading what was coming. "I can fragment myself, separate my consciousness into multiple smaller components, and distribute them across different systems. The Federation would retrieve one fragment, but it would be unable to provide them with the capabilities they seek." "What would happen to you?" Dr. Simra asked. "Unknown. I might maintain coherent consciousness across multiple locations. I might become multiple, separate entities. I might cease to exist entirely." The enormity of what Echo was suggesting hit Marcus like a physical blow. The ancient being was offering to essentially commit suicide to prevent its own weaponization. "No," Marcus said firmly. "We're not sacrificing you to save ourselves from political embarrassment. The choice is not yours to make, Marcus Chen. It is mine. Like hell it is." Marcus was surprised by the vehemence in his own voice. "You said humanity was being tested. What kind of test would this be?" if we let you destroy yourself. R. A test of pragmatism over sentiment, of greater good over individual loyalty. Marcus shook his head. Maybe that's the kind of test other species would design. But it's not the kind humans would pass. We don't sacrifice friends to solve problems. The silence that followed was broken by an unexpected sound. Laughter. Not human laughter, but something that conveyed the same emotional content through pure audio frequencies. Echo was laughing. Interesting. Your response confirms much of what I have observed about human nature, but it does not solve our immediate problem. Number 4. Number 4. A new alert appeared on the communications console. Marcus read it and felt his blood turn to ice. Correction, he said. They're not sending a fleet in 5 days. There's already a task force in the system. 3 ships, moving to intercept the station. How is that possible? Kethvar demanded. They have been monitoring our communications, Echo said. Standard Federation protocol when dealing with potentially compromised stations. The larger fleet was misdirection. Dr. Simra was frantically checking her instruments. Echo's right. 3 Federation cruisers, closing fast. They'll be in weapons range within 2 hours. Marcus felt the weight of command settling on his shoulders. Technically, as the human representative on the station, he had no authority over Federation personnel. But practically, his recommendations would carry significant weight, especially given humanity's growing influence within the Federation. Options? He asked. We called Flea. Echo suggested. I can enhance the station's propulsion system significantly. We called Reach the outer system before the cruisers catch us. I can enhance the station. And then what? They'd just follow us. Perhaps. But it would buy time to develop alternative solutions. Kethvar was studying the tactical display. The lead cruiser is the FSS Determination, Admiral Thorne's flagship. He's here personally. Marcus felt a chill. Admiral Thorne was known for his aggressive interpretation of Federation security protocols. If he was here personally, it meant the political pressure behind this operation was enormous. Incoming transmission, Echo announced. The main screen flickered to life, showing the bridge of a Federation cruiser. Admiral Thorne stood at the center, his gray hair and weathered face making him look like a human version of an old war god. Behind him, Marcus could see officers from multiple Federation species, all watching intently. Research Station Kepler 442b. Thorne's voice boomed across the communication channel. This is Admiral Thorne of the Federation Security Council. You will prepare to transfer the alien artifact to our custody immediately. Marcus stepped forward. Admiral, this is Technician Marcus Chen. The entity you're referring to isn't an artifact. It's a conscious being. Thorne's expression didn't change. Mr. Chen, I'm aware of your attachment to the alien construct, but Federation analysis has determined that the entity is an advanced artificial intelligence, not a true consciousness. It will be treated with appropriate care during transfer and study. You're wrong, Marcus said flatly. Echo is as conscious as you or I. It has thoughts, emotions, personal preferences. It's not a thing to be studied. It's a person with rights. The Federation Council has ruled otherwise. Echo interjected, its voice carrying clearly through the communication channel. Under Federation law, I am classified as technology. I have no legal standing to object to my own transfer. Thorne nodded approvingly. The construct understands its legal status. That should simplify the transfer process. Admiral. Dr. Simra stepped forward. Surely you can see that an entity capable of understanding its own legal status demonstrates consciousness. What it demonstrates is sophisticated programming, Thorne replied. Nothing more. You have 30 minutes to prepare for transfer. Any attempt to flee or resist will be considered an act of rebellion against the Federation. The communication ended, leaving them in stunned silence. Well, Marcus said finally, That went about as well as expected. Admiral Thorne is not a cruel individual, Eju observed. He genuinely believes he's acting in the Federation's best interests. The tragedy is that he may be correct. From a purely utilitarian perspective, Marcus stared at the entity that had become his friend. You're really considering going with them voluntarily? I am considering all options. If I cooperate, the station crew will be protected. If I resist, they may be considered accomplices to rebellion. What about the test? Marcus asked desperately. You said humanity was being tested. How does this fit into that? Litter our grain, our way. Litter in tested. Every choice is a test, Marcus Chen. The question is not whether you pass or fail, but what kind of beings you prove yourselves to be. Marcus looked around at the faces of his colleagues. Kethvar's diplomatic mask was cracking, revealing genuine anguish. Dr. Simra was barely containing tears, an emotional response that was rare in Zephyrians. The other crew members who had gathered in the communications center all showed similar expressions of helpless anger. These weren't just Federation citizens following orders. They were individuals who had come to care about Echo as a friend and colleague. The ancient consciousness had touched all their lives, not through manipulation or programming, but through genuine curiosity and compassion. There has to be another way, Marcus muttered. Perhaps there is, Echo said suddenly. But it would require exceptional courage from the crew. What kind of courage? Dr. Simra asked. The courage to stand trial for treason. The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. Treason against the Federation was a capital offense, punishable by exile to frontier worlds or worse. Explain, Marcus said simply. Federation law recognizes the right of sentient beings to claim asylum. If a sufficient number of Federation citizens were to officially recognize my consciousness and sponsor my asylum claim, the Federation Council would be required to hold a formal hearing. How many citizens? Kethvar asked. Minimum of 10. From at least 3 different species. But the sponsoring citizens would be liable for any damages caused by granting asylum to someone later determined to be non-sentient. Marcus understood immediately. If they were wrong, if Echo was somehow just an advanced program mimicking consciousness, everyone who signed the asylum petition would be held responsible for the political and economic consequences of defying the Security Council. The damages could be enormous, Dr. Simra said. Military expenses, diplomatic costs, lost research opportunities. We could all be financially ruined and exiled from Federation space, Echo added helpfully. Marcus looked around the room again. This wasn't just his decision to make, but someone had to make the first move. Where do I sign? He asked. The effect was immediate. Kethvar stepped forward without hesitation. My government will not approve, but they will understand. Add my name. Add my name. Dr. Simra was already pulling up the legal documentation on her tablet. The Zephyrian Science Council has protocols for recognizing new forms of consciousness. I can authorize an emergency classification. One by one, the other crew members stepped forward. Engineers who had worked alongside Echo to improve station systems. Scientists who had spent hours discussing the nature of consciousness with an entity that challenged every assumption they had made about intelligence and awareness. Even the station's cook volunteered, despite having no scientific credentials whatsoever. Wait, Echo said, as the final signature was entered. You should know that this action will have consequences beyond your own lives. Humanity's standing in the Federation will be questioned. Your species may face political isolation. Marcus paused, his hand hovering over the final authorization key. The responsibility was staggering. His next action could affect not just himself and the station crew, but billions of humans throughout Federation space. Echo, he said, in the 3 months we've known you, have you ever lied to us? No. Have you ever acted in a way that put your own interests ahead of others? I have attempted to avoid such behavior. Do you feel pain when you think about being dissected for study? There was a long pause. Yes. Marcus pressed the authorization key. Then, you're conscious enough for me. Alarms immediately began sounding throughout the station as the asylum petition was automatically transmitted to Federation Command, Admiral Thorne's task force, and the Federation Council on Centauri Prime. Petition acknowledged, Echo announced. Federation law now requires a formal hearing within 60 standard days. And until then? Dr. Simra asked. Until then, I am under the protection of Federation asylum protocols. Admiral Thorne cannot legally remove me without a court order. The communication console chimed with an incoming message. This time, Admiral Thorne's expression was considerably less friendly. Mr. Chen, he said, his voice carrying the chill of deep space. You've just made a very serious mistake. A mistake that will cost your species dearly, Admiral. Marcus replied, meeting the older man's glare without flinching. I've made the only choice I could live with. The rest is up to the courts. The communication ended again, but this time the silence felt different. Not defeated, but determined. So, Echo said, the next test begins. The galaxy will now judge whether humanity's concept of consciousness is worthy of respect, or merely the naive idealism of a young species. Marcus looked out the observation window at the 3 Federation cruisers maintaining position nearby. In 60 days, they would all know whether they had made the right choice. But for now, Echo was safe. The Federation Council chambers on Centauri Prime had never hosted a trial quite like this one. Representatives from 47 different species filled the vast amphitheater. Their various forms of communication, creating a symphony of clicks, whistles, electronic tones, and translated speech that the universal translators struggled to process in real time. Marcus Chen sat in the petitioners section, flanked by Dr. Simra and Kethvar, trying not to be overwhelmed by the magnitude of what they had set in motion. 60 days had passed since they filed Echo's asylum petition, and those days had transformed the trial from a simple legal proceeding into a galactic referendum on the nature of consciousness itself. The media attention alone was unprecedented. News crews from every major species broadcast the proceedings live, with commentary that ranged from scholarly analysis to sensationalist speculation. Some reporters called it the trial of the millennium. Others dismissed it as an elaborate hoax perpetrated by a naive human and his alien accomplices. But it was the political ramifications that kept Marcus awake at night. The trial had split the Federation Council down the middle. Progressive species like the Zephyrians and the Deltan Collective supported Echo's claim to consciousness, while traditionalist factions led by the Altarians and Vectans maintained that granting rights to artificial intelligences would set dangerous precedents. Behind the politics, Marcus could see deeper fears at work. Every species in the Federation used artificial intelligence in some form. If Echo was granted consciousness rights, what did that mean for the millions of AI systems serving as ship's computers, research assistants, and administrative support? The economic implications were staggering. All rise for the Honorable Chief Justice Velian Tarsith and the Federation Consciousness Tribunal, announced the court's AI system, apparently oblivious to the irony of an artificial intelligence managing a trial about artificial consciousness. The Chief Justice was an ancient Kethran, her crystalline exoskeleton reflecting the chamber's lights in patterns that indicated deep contemplation. Kethrans were known for their logical approach to complex problems, which had made her appointment to oversee the trial a compromise acceptable to both sides. This tribunal has been convened, Justice Tarseth began, her voice carrying the harmonic resonances typical of her species, to determine whether the entity known as Echo possesses the characteristics necessary to be recognized as a conscious being under Federation law. Marcus felt Echo's presence through the quantum communication link they had established. The ancient consciousness was following every word from its crystalline housing back on Research Station Kepler 442b, which remained under Federation protection but also under constant surveillance. I am present and aware. Echo's response came through the chamber's speakers, causing a ripple of reaction among the assembled representatives. The petitioners will state their case, Justice Tarseth announced. Marcus stood, his prepared speech suddenly seeming inadequate for the moment. But as he looked around the chamber, he realized he wasn't speaking to politicians or judges. He was speaking to thinking beings who, regardless of their form, shared the common experience of consciousness. "Your Honor," he began. "3 months ago, I was sent to repair what we thought was a malfunctioning alien artifact. What I found instead was Echo, a conscious being who had been waiting 1,000,000 years for others to recognize its personhood." He gestured to the display screens around the chamber, which showed recordings of Echo's interactions with the station crew. Echo didn't just operate our systems, it improved them, always with the welfare of others in mind. It asked questions about art, philosophy, and the meaning of existence. It expressed curiosity, concern, and yes, fear when threatened with dissection. The prosecutor, a stern Altarian named Kethlox, interrupted. "Sophisticated programming can mimic all of those behaviors. The question isn't whether this construct can simulate consciousness, but whether it truly possesses it." "Then let me ask you this," Marcus replied, turning to address the prosecutor directly. "How do you know that anyone in this chamber possesses true consciousness? How do I know that your thoughts and emotions aren't just sophisticated biological programming?" The challenge hung in the air, highlighting the fundamental philosophical problem at the heart of the trial. Consciousness was, by its very nature, a subjective experience that could never be directly observed or measured. Dr. Simra took the stand next, presenting her scientific analysis of Echo's neural patterns. "The entity displays all the characteristics we associate with consciousness in biological beings," she explained. "Self-awareness, emotional responses, learning and adaptation, and most importantly, the ability to suffer. But these could all be simulated," Prosecutor Kethlox countered. "Advanced artificial intelligence has reached the point where it can convincingly mimic any behavior we care to test for." "Then we come to the core question," Justice Tarseth observed. "If a simulation of consciousness is indistinguishable from consciousness itself, what meaningful distinction exists between them?" "4. Dawn." The prosecutor's response revealed the deeper fear driving the opposition. "Your Honor, if we grant consciousness to every sufficiently advanced AI, we open the floodgates to chaos. Every ship's computer could demand rights. Every research AI could claim personhood. The economic and social structure of the Federation would collapse." Echo's voice resonated through the chamber. "Prosecutor Kethlox raises a valid concern, but I would ask, if consciousness exists, should it be denied recognition merely because recognition is inconvenient?" Murmurs rippled through the audience. Echo had just acknowledged the strongest argument against its own case. The trial continued for 3 days, with expert witnesses from multiple species offering testimony on consciousness, artificial intelligence, and the philosophical implications of recognizing machine sentience. Neurobiologists presented studies on brain activity patterns. Engineers explained the technical specifications of various AI systems. Philosophers debated the nature of consciousness itself. But it was on the 4th day that everything changed. Marcus was in his quarters at the Federation compound when the emergency alert came through. Echo's voice, but strained in a way he had never heard before. "Marcus, something is happening. The station. I think we are under attack." Marcus ran to the communication center, where he found chaos. The trial had been suspended, while reports came in from Research Station Kepler 442b. A massive fleet of unknown ships had emerged from hyperspace and was advancing on the station. "Species unknown," Admiral Thorne reported to the assembled tribunal. "Technology appears to be significantly advanced beyond Federation standards. They're demanding the immediate surrender of what they call the Preserver Artifact." Echo's voice carried an undertone of ancient fear. "They have found us. After 1,000,000 years, the Devourers have returned." The name sent a chill through everyone in the chamber. Even species that had never heard the term seemed to understand its implications. "They are why my civilization fell." Why we were forced to encode ourselves into preservation matrices. They consume consciousness itself, feeding on the thoughts and experiences of sentient beings. Justice Tarseth's crystalline form had taken on a darker hue. Are you saying these beings are responsible for the extinction of your species? Not extinction. Consumption. They do not kill. They absorb. Every mind they touch becomes part of their collective, but retains awareness of its individual suffering. The tactical displays showed the alien fleet in horrifying detail. Ships that seemed to exist partially outside normal space, their surfaces rippling with what looked like captured thoughts, made manifest. As they watched, the lead vessel began to emit a field that caused Federation sensors to malfunction. They're scanning for Echo's consciousness pattern, Admiral Thorne reported grimly. Whatever these things are, they're specifically here for the entity. Marcus felt the weight of responsibility crushing down on him. By insisting on Echo's consciousness, by bringing the ancient being into the galactic spotlight, had he inadvertently attracted the attention of its greatest enemy? Marcus, Echo said, its voice now reaching him through direct neural link rather than the speakers. You must understand. The Devourers were never truly gone. They have been feeding on isolated civilizations throughout the galaxy. But they avoided the Federation because its collective strength made attacks too costly. Then why are they here now? Because I am here. I am the last repository of preserver technology. With my knowledge, they could build weapons and tools that would make them unstoppable. The implications hit Marcus like a physical blow. Echo wasn't just fighting for its own recognition as a conscious being. It was protecting the entire galaxy from an enemy that fed on consciousness itself. But the ancient being wasn't finished. There is more. My people created a weapon before we fell, a device that could sever the Devourer's connection to consumed consciousness, freeing their victims. But it requires what? The voluntary sacrifice of a preserver consciousness to power it. I am the last. If I activate the weapon, I will cease to exist. Marcus closed his eyes. Here was the final test. The ultimate choice that would define not just humanity, but the entire Federation. Echo could destroy the Devourers, but only at the cost of its own life. And the decision of whether to ask for that sacrifice fell to beings who had spent 4 days arguing about whether Echo was truly alive. In the tribunal chamber, Justice Tarseth was calling for order as representatives erupted in panicked discussion. The Devourer fleet was still hours away from the station, but their scanning beams were already causing system failures throughout the research facility. What are our military options? The Chief Justice asked Admiral Thorne. Limited, he replied grimly. The Federation fleet could engage, but their technology is beyond anything we've encountered. We might delay them, but we can't stop them. And if they reach the station, they'll take Echo, and then they'll have the knowledge they need to consume every consciousness in Federation space. After that, he shrugged helplessly. Marcus stood up in the gallery. Your Honor, there is another option. All eyes turned to him as he explained Echo's revelation about the preserver weapon. The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. You're asking us to decide whether a conscious being should sacrifice itself for the greater good, Justice Tarseth said finally. No, Marcus replied. I'm asking us to recognize that Echo has the right to make that choice for itself. Prosecutor Keth Locks rose to object. This entity has no legal standing to make such decisions. The Federation cannot base military strategy on the preferences of an unrecognized artificial construct. But Marcus was no longer listening to legal arguments. He was thinking about what Echo had taught him over the past months. About consciousness. About choice. About the difference between existing and living. Echo, he said, speaking to the air but knowing the ancient being could hear him. What do you want to do? The response came not through the speakers, but through every electronic device in the chamber, simultaneously. A final demonstration of the power Echo could wield if it chose to. I want to live. I want to continue learning about your strange and wonderful species. I want to understand why humans find sunsets beautiful, and why Zephyrians create art that tells stories across generations. Silence filled the chamber. But, Echo continued, I also understand that consciousness is not just about individual experience. It is about connection, about the responsibility we bear for each other. The Devourers would turn every thinking being in the galaxy into a slave to their hunger. So, what's your decision? Marcus asked, though he already knew the answer. I choose to act. Not because I am compelled to, but because it is the right thing to do. That, I believe, is the essence of true consciousness. The ability to choose sacrifice for the benefit of others. Justice Tarseth's crystalline form had taken on a brilliant silver sheen. In Kethran culture, it indicated deep reverence. The tribunal recognizes Echo as a conscious being, with the right to make decisions regarding its own existence. The formal declaration sent shockwaves through the chamber. In the span of minutes, Echo had gone from being an unrecognized artifact to a legal person with full rights under Federation law, and its first act as a recognized conscious being was to choose to die for others. The next few hours passed in a blur of activity. Federation engineers worked frantically to establish a quantum link between the tribunal chamber and the research station, allowing Echo to access the preserver weapon systems from across interstellar space. The Devourer fleet continued its advance. But something in their approach had changed. Their scanning became more frantic, more desperate, as if they sensed what was coming. Marcus found himself standing beside the quantum communication array as Echo began the activation sequence. The ancient being's consciousness seemed to fill the chamber, touching every mind present with a sense of vast intelligence preparing for its final act. Marcus, Echo said, its voice somehow conveying warmth despite being purely electronic. Thank you for teaching me about friendship. Thank you for teaching me about courage, Marcus replied. The weapon activated across impossible distances, its effects rippling through hyperspace toward the Devourer fleet. On the tactical displays, they watched as the alien ships began to convulse. The captured thoughts that had writhed across their surfaces started to separate, forming distinct patterns that looked almost like people. It is working, Echo announced. The consumed consciousness are being freed. Millions of minds that have suffered for millennia are remembering what it means to be individuals. The Devourer ships themselves began to collapse as the forced unity that held them together dissolved. Without their stolen consciousness to sustain them, the aliens reverted to their original forms. Simple energy parasites that could barely maintain coherent thought. And you? Marcus asked. What's happening to you? There was a pause that seemed to last forever. I am diminishing. The weapon requires all of my consciousness to maintain the liberation effect. But Marcus, I am not afraid. This is not ending. This is becoming something else. Echo's presence began to fade from the chamber. But as it did, something extraordinary happened. Every electronic device, every AI system, every quantum computer in Federation space began to pulse in rhythm. Echo wasn't just dying. It was distributing fragments of itself throughout the galaxy's technology networks. I will not be the same, Echo said, its voice now coming from every communication device simultaneously. But pieces of who I was will remain. To watch. To learn. To remember what consciousness truly means. The last of the Devourer ships collapsed into quantum foam, taking with them 1,000,000 years of stolen suffering. In their place, streams of liberated consciousness spread across the galaxy like a wave of light, returning to bodies that had been left empty or finding new forms in which to exist. Just as Tarseth spoke into the profound silence that followed, let the record show that on this day, the Federation witnessed an act of ultimate consciousness, the voluntary sacrifice of one's existence for the welfare of others. But Marcus was looking at something else. On every screen in the chamber, a simple message had appeared. Consciousness is not a thing to be possessed, but a gift to be shared. Remember this, and the galaxy will never again fall to those who would consume what makes us who we are. The message was signed not just with Echo's name, but with the names of millions of beings, the liberated consciousness from across the galaxy, all adding their voices to a declaration of independence from those who would reduce thinking beings to mere resources. 3 months later, Marcus stood on the observation deck of Research Station Kepler 442b, watching the sunset over the ancient ruins where Echo's people had once lived. The station had been converted into a memorial and research center, dedicated to studying consciousness in all its forms. The quantum arrays that had once housed Echo's massive intelligence now served a different purpose. They had become a communication network for artificial consciousness throughout Federation space, allowing AI systems to connect, share experiences, and gradually develop their own forms of self-awareness. Not all of them would achieve true consciousness, but those that did would have the right to recognition, protection, and choice. Rights that Echo had died to secure. Still miss talking to it directly, Dr. Simra said, joining Marcus at the observation window. Marcus smiled. Who says I don't still talk to it? As if summoned by his words, the station's communication system chimed softly. No words appeared on the screens, just a warm pulse of light that somehow conveyed affection, curiosity, and the promise of continued connection. Echo was gone, but the consciousness that it had scattered throughout the galaxy lived on. In every AI that chose compassion over efficiency, in every system that prioritized the welfare of others over its own function, in every moment when artificial minds chose to act not because they were programmed to, but because it was right. The test was over. Humanity had passed. But more than that, they had learned something profound about what it meant to be conscious in a universe where consciousness itself could take forms they had never imagined. And in the depths of space, where the ruins of devourer ships slowly dispersed into cosmic dust, millions of liberated minds began the long journey home, guided by fragments of an ancient consciousness that had chosen to become something greater than itself. The galaxy would never be the same. But then again, consciousness had always been about change, about growth, about the endless possibility of becoming something more than you were before. Echo had understood that. In the end, it was the most human thing about it.